Most people think they're in control of their lives, but a single psychological shift separates leaders from everyone else. Are you one of them? Everyone believes they're making choices freely. Every decision feels like it's yours. But here's the truth. Most people are following invisible psychological scripts they don't even notice.
Leaders aren't born. They're defined by a single shift in perception, a deep internal recognition of patterns others can't see. While followers react, leaders anticipate. While others chase validation, leaders extract power from clarity. This shift doesn't require charisma, money, or status. It requires seeing the hidden mechanisms shaping every interaction, every influence, every subtle push and pull in human behavior.
The moment you notice it, the moment you internalize it, your mind begins to operate differently. And that difference is what separates those who lead from those who endlessly follow. The first psychological shift that separates leaders from followers is deceptively simple: awareness of the invisible rules guiding human behavior.
Most people operate on autopilot, reacting to external pressures, social expectations, and emotional impulses without noticing the patterns controlling them. They assume they're acting freely, but every interaction, whether at work, in relationships, or online, is shaped by hidden influences they can't name. Leaders, on the other hand, see these mechanisms clearly.
I've seen it up close. Someone who pauses, observes, and identifies recurring patterns doesn't just react, they anticipate. They notice when a compliment is a trap, when a story is meant to manipulate, when a seemingly innocent gesture carries hidden weight. This awareness isn't about being paranoid, it's about decoding reality. Consider a simple example. Two employees receive the same feedback.
One reacts defensively, feels slighted, and loses confidence. The other interprets it as a signal, understanding the motives behind the words, the unspoken expectations, and the broader dynamics at play. That single difference changes their trajectory entirely. The foundational skill isn't persuasion or dominance, it's recognition. Recognizing patterns, recognizing intent, recognizing the subtle cues most overlook.
Leaders develop this skill incrementally through careful observation and disciplined reflection. Every conversation, every encounter becomes a learning ground. And each time they notice what others miss, their mental map of the social world grows sharper, giving them a silent advantage over everyone around them. This is the base. Everything else, the strategies, the influence, the authority, stems from this single shift.
Without it, all other tools are just noise. Here's the unsettling truth. What most people consider freedom is actually limitation. They pride themselves on making independent choices, yet their decisions are dictated by invisible forces they barely notice. Social norms, authority cues, peer pressure, subtle manipulations in language and tone, all of it shapes behavior before a thought even forms.
The irony is brutal. The more people cling to the idea of control, the more they surrender it. Leaders, however, flip the script. They don't fight external pressures blindly. They observe, decode, and use them as data. While others see constraints, they see levers. While most feel trapped, they feel informed. The same environment that limits the majority becomes a playground of opportunity for those who recognize the patterns. Think about it. A meeting at work, a negotiation, even a casual conversation. Most people respond to words superficially. Leaders read the gaps between words, the hesitation in tone, the subtle emphasis that reveals intention. That awareness allows them to act strategically, to influence outcomes, and to remain steps ahead in a game others don't even realize they're playing. This isn't theory. I've seen ordinary individuals, considered average by everyone around them, rise to positions of influence simply by noticing what others ignore. The shift is internal, invisible, and immediately practical. Once your mind starts seeing the hidden structure behind behavior, you can't unsee it. And that perspective change, that cognitive flip, is exactly what separates the people who lead from those who endlessly follow.
If you think this is just theory, think again. Every interaction you've had today, every message, every glance, every choice was quietly shaped by patterns most never notice. But once you start seeing them, your entire perception changes. What seems ordinary becomes a map of influence, and suddenly, the game everyone else plays blindly is laid bare before you. Power isn't handed out. It's observed, recognized, and quietly claimed. Most people assume influence comes from titles, wealth, or authority, but the real dynamics operate beneath the surface. Leaders understand the invisible architecture of social interactions, the subtle push and pull that dictates who takes initiative, who defers, and who is followed without question. I've seen it up close. In corporate settings, the loudest voice rarely carries the most weight. Instead, those who quietly read patterns, tone, hesitation, choice of words, body language, identify leverage points and act decisively. A single well-timed observation or question can shift a room, change a decision, or establish dominance without overt confrontation. Followers, on the other hand, react, mirror, and often unknowingly reinforce others' influence, giving away control they think they hold. Consider historical figures, too.
Carl Jung observed how some individuals navigate social hierarchies with subtle insight. They perceive the unspoken rules, anticipate reactions, and strategically position themselves to maximize their influence. This isn't manipulation for selfish gain, it's mastery of the environment, an internal awareness that transforms ordinary interactions into opportunities for impact. Even in everyday life, the pattern repeats.
Two colleagues receive the same instructions. One sees the explicit directive, the other sees the hidden expectation, the interpersonal tension, and the unspoken agenda. The former completes the task. The latter navigates the dynamics, wins trust, and influences outcomes long after the task is done. Leaders treat relationships like a chessboard, not a playground.
They notice the invisible currents, recognize leverage, and act with calculated intent. Followers treat relationships like chaos, reacting emotionally, unaware of the structures guiding them. This understanding of power, subtle yet pervasive, is the cornerstone of leadership. And once you internalize it, every interaction becomes a lesson in influence. Every decision a chance to shift the balance in your favor. Let's break it down further.
Human behavior follows invisible threads, subtle cues woven into every interaction. Most people miss them completely, reacting to the surface while the underlying mechanisms dictate outcomes. Leaders see the entire architecture, the anticipatory signals, the emotional triggers, and the unspoken social rules that shape choices without anyone realizing it. For example, consider influence in a workplace or social group. A follower might notice someone speaking confidently and assume authority. A leader notices much more: hesitation, micro-expressions, and patterns of reinforcement. They read what is said, what is withheld, and what the environment itself encourages. That insight allows them to predict behavior, control responses, and quietly guide outcomes. This extends beyond obvious hierarchies. Even subtle consumer behaviors, online interactions, or digital engagement carry predictable patterns. Notifications, social proof, scarcity, and framing. These aren't just marketing tricks. They mirror the same psychological levers present in all human dynamics. Leaders decode these signals intuitively, identifying leverage points others never see. Historical and modern examples overlap seamlessly. Carl Jung himself analyzed archetypes and the collective unconscious, revealing that certain patterns repeat across contexts.
Leaders exploit these recurring motifs, not manipulatively, but strategically, turning insight into action. Followers are caught in the loop, responding to the stimuli rather than understanding it. The key psychological mechanisms at work include recognition, anticipation, and strategic patience.
Recognition allows you to see patterns, anticipation lets you forecast behavior, and patience ensures timing aligns with maximum impact. Leaders integrate these mechanisms effortlessly, turning observation into subtle influence. Followers, by contrast, react impulsively, unaware that their choices are shaped long before they even register consciously. Once this layered analysis is internalized, the world itself becomes readable.
Ordinary interactions transform into lessons in influence. Conversations, meetings, and decisions are no longer chaotic. They are structured, navigable, and exploitable by those who perceive the hidden threats. This depth of understanding isn't optional for leaders, it's essential. And every moment spent unaware keeps the majority firmly in the shadows, while those who see the pattern rise steadily above.
Pause for a moment and observe the world around you. Notice the subtle interactions in a coffee shop, the small gestures between colleagues, or the way strangers navigate space without thought. Most of these actions go unnoticed, but they reveal rhythms, patterns, and tiny unspoken agreements that guide behavior. Take note of how people pause, react, or defer naturally. This isn't about control or manipulation, it's simply about noticing.
Now, take all you've observed and analyzed and integrate it into your own awareness. The shift that separates leaders from followers isn't about talent, luck, or external circumstances. It's about perception. Leaders internalize patterns that others ignore. They understand that influence, control, and opportunity are embedded in every interaction, often invisible to the untrained eye. This awareness carries responsibility.
Recognizing hidden mechanisms doesn't automatically grant power. It demands deliberate observation, reflection, and disciplined application. You must practice noticing micro-behaviors, decoding intentions, and interpreting subtle cues in real time. Each interaction becomes a lesson, each observation a tool for navigating the social world strategically. Consider it a personal system for mapping influence.
Leaders don't need to dominate overtly. They act with precision, guided by insight rather than impulse. Followers, unaware of the underlying structures, remain reactive, predictable, and easily influenced. This distinction isn't theoretical. It manifests in everyday life, conversations, negotiations, digital interactions, and even casual decisions. The psychological takeaway is simple, yet profound. Mastery begins with recognition.
Once you see the hidden patterns, your mind operates differently. You anticipate, you adapt, and you subtly influence outcomes without confrontation. This internalization is what creates invisible leverage, turning ordinary moments into strategic advantages. The final lesson is clear. Awareness is power, but only if you integrate it into action. Observe, reflect, and apply.
Each choice, each perception, and each interaction becomes a building block in your personal leadership framework. And once you adopt this mindset, the boundary between follower and leader becomes unmistakably visible because you've already crossed it internally. Take another moment to step back and observe. Watch interactions unfold without judgment. Notice the subtle signals in body language, the brief pauses before decisions, and the tiny choices that reveal underlying intentions. This isn't about control or manipulation. It's about quiet awareness. By simply paying attention, you give your mind the space to map patterns and understand behaviors. Small observations build clarity, and clarity begins the process of mental empowerment.
Leaders start here, noticing what others overlook, letting insight guide every action,
without urgency or pressure. By now, you've seen what most people never notice, the invisible currents that shape every choice, every interaction, every subtle influence. Followers move through life blind to these patterns, reacting, mirroring, and surrendering control without knowing it. Leaders, however, step into a different dimension.
They observe, decode, and integrate insight into action. This isn't a secret reserved for the powerful. It's a mindset you can cultivate. The shift begins internally, in moments of quiet observation and disciplined recognition. Once you internalize these mechanisms, ordinary encounters become opportunities. Every conversation, decision, and relationship transforms into a map of influence you can navigate strategically.
Remember, awareness alone isn't enough. Action must follow. Apply what you notice, anticipate responses, and act with calculated intent. Each small choice compounds, creating leverage that others never even perceive. So ask yourself, will you remain a follower shaped by forces you don't understand? Or will you take the mental leap, recognize the hidden structures, and operate with the subtle authority that separates leaders from the crowd?
The patterns are there. The recognition is yours to claim. The question is, will you?